Welcome in everyone to MBA Unplugged. My name is Charles Winfrey III. I am a sophomore business finance major from Nashville, Tennessee. Today I am by myself. We are missing my co-host Liam Wong. He's out today. It is allergy season. Pollen in Atlanta is a problem right now, but I know Liam is on the phone watching. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and take over the duties of introducing our esteemed guest today. Dr. Adria Welcher is a dedicated scholar and leader in the field of sociology with a deep commitment to understanding race, class, and social mobility. She earned her MA in sociology from Stanford University and her PhD from Emory. Her journey with Morehouse began in 2011 as a Mellon Fellow, and over the years, she has remained a vital part of the institution. Now, serving as the chair of the Department of Sociology, she plays a vital role in shaping their academic and social discourse surrounding Black student experiences in higher education. We're here today with Dr. Adria Welcher to explore the complexities of higher education, the Black middle class, and the evolving challenges Black students face today. Dr. Welcher, how are you today?
I'm so great. Where'd you get all that information from?
LinkedIn's a very powerful.
Like,
LinkedIn is a very powerful, website.
That's impressive.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm well. This is a podcast I have been waiting for a long time. As many students who watched at Morehouse have heard, at least, or if you haven't taken a class with Dr. Welcher, you 100% should. So to get started, Dr. Welcher, I want to kind of do somewhat of an icebreaker, and I want to ask you, what do I need to know about you to understand the person who is sitting in front of me today?
That is a really great question. So I think what I want people to know about me is that I am moved by love, right? So of course I'm a woman of faith, and so that matters. But my background and my research, what I study, everything has to do with who I am and who I've been shaped to be, right? So I grew up in a middle-class family, a blended family, but a middle-class family nonetheless. Went to Spelman, and that's when I sort of began to see the complexities and diversity of the middle class, right? So growing up in high school, I did cotillions and all that kind of stuff, but I didn't know about like the Jack and Jills and the Lynx and all that kind of stuff. Knew about the sororities, but that was sort of the tip of the iceberg, right? So then I got to Spelman and I learned all the things that were Black and middle class, and it didn't really register. Sort of the implications of what that identity meant. And then after I graduated Spelman, had a wonderful time while I was there, did all the things. Then I went to University of Michigan for my first master's in higher education. And when I was there is when it began to sink in that there was something different about this HBCU experience than about being at I call them historically white colleges and universities, because the problem is not that they're predominantly white, but that they're historically white.
HWCU. Okay, HWCU.
So when I was at this HWCU, I recognized that there was something different about sort of the Black experience that I'd had at Spelman than from the Black experience from many of my colleagues from Detroit who just had a different background, different upbringing, right? So this interest about the Black middle class was piqued.
Interesting.
And I was studying higher education at Michigan. So I was very, very interested in what students brought to the table that shaped their experiences. After Michigan, then I went to Stanford and then on to complete my doctorate at Emory. And between Stanford and Emory, I got married and I had children. I now have 4. At that time, I only had 3. I had 4 by the time I finished Emory. But I was really concerned about how to raise those kids, right? Like, where should we live? Where should we send them to school? How does that matter, right? How do we make those decisions? How do we have those conversations? So all of my work, all of my research, all those things that I do relate to literally how I live and who I am. So that's my story in a nutshell, and I think that sort of knowing that about me and that I live and move and breathe in love, at the end of the day, I want everybody to know that they are special and significant. That's who I am. So
okay.
Who you have at the table.
So this is an awesome start because I've just been cheesing the whole time that she was talking, because just from my couple experiences with Dr. Welcher, it has been such a learning experience, and it's just, you feel her energy around. So you may be wondering why we have a sociology professor on a finance tailored business podcast. And the reason for that is she alluded to it earlier, which I would love for you to allude to, is really you talked about the Black middle class. And I think that's so important because it relates to so many of our viewers. So just to kind of start simplicity at level 1, what is the Black middle class and what does that really entail?
Oh, wow. So this is a question that I could literally write a dissertation on. So the Black middle class, if you ask an E. Franklin Frazier, doesn't exist. So when we think about the middle class in America, we don't have to say white because it's white middle class. So for us to then have to invoke the race piece in front of it means that we're trying to create something that doesn't necessarily exist on its own in society. because there is no white middle class. We just say middle class. But when we add the black, it complicates it, right? So this notion of intersectionality is what matters. Now, the way that we perform our middle classedness is, we have the credentials. We went to the Morehouses, the Spelmans, the Howards, the Harvards, the Stanfords, right? All these schools. We live in certain communities. We engage in certain activities and events and organizations, right? That is how we have come to make sense of the black middle class. The decisions that we make about finances is where it gets sticky. Because so much of what it means to be black and middle class in this country is about being conspicuous, right? So that somebody can look at you and say, oh, he about that life, right? Like, oh, I can tell the car he drives, the neighborhood they live in. The truth of the matter is, middle class folks and wealthy folks don't display their money. That's just not how they move. So when we think about the black middle class, we have to think, one, about what the actual definition is. Is it based on income? Is it based on what you do with your leisure time? There are several ways that sociologists engage class. But importantly, is this intersection between race and class a real thing? Does it exist? And many scholars would say no, but we're here. This is how we live. So we figure out a way to display our middle classedness in all the aspects of our lives.
Okay, interesting. So do you think, you talked about there are decisions that we make that kind of, I want to say, put us in the situation we're in, but they helped influence. So my question to you would be, is this something that was kind of forged upon us, or do you think because of certain actions in certain cultures, we put ourselves in this environment?
So I think the way that race has worked in America and the way that black folks in general have been socialized to emulate whiteness, that once we were given access, right now, whether it was full access or even how we want to talk about that today, we can complicate it. But once we were given access, all we desired to do was to be as white as possible, right? So our proximity to whiteness often defines our success. So for example, there's a colored water fountain and a white water fountain. That white water's got to be better, right? So we're breaking our neck to get to the white water fountain when it's the same water, right? So it has been built into the way that we've been taught, the way that we've been socialized through the media, through our families, through education, that the closer we can get to white, which we'll never achieve, right? And in many cases, many of us don't want to achieve whiteness, but the closer we get to whiteness, the better we are. So we've created a middle class life based off of proximity to whiteness.
I'm perplexed because I've never heard that reference before. We're trying to reach whiteness, but the water fountain example is the same water. But is it though?
Yes, in the water fountain example it is.
It was in the water fountain.
Now,
the water fountain
I will
example.
say what it means to be white, the privilege that comes with whiteness,
Yeah,
is a privilege that we'll never experience, no matter how folks think about all of the successful financially black folks that we know. Think about even Robert Smith, right, who was a friend to Morehouse. Immediately after he paid off about $40 million of debt of the class of 2019, the IRS came after him. Meanwhile, we have a president who's now serving his second term who has publicly stated, I don't pay taxes. And he still hasn't paid taxes. Right? So that privilege sets up a paradox that we have not yet been able to master or to figure out. And where I think the rub really is that we've got to go back to the black community and see the success and value within ourselves and not use some external barometer to evaluate our success.
Okay, interesting. You alluded to the president. My question next would be, obviously we're here at Morehouse, you're a professor, you're in higher education. Do you think in a way that chasing whiteness has fed and led to some challenges that we face within our HBCUs?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And I think that this is part of what Morehouse struggles with specifically, right? So this notion of the Morehouse man, this idea of the Morehouse man, when I say that, we all conjure in our heads an image, right? So we have this image of what it means to be a Morehouse man. What about all of the students at Morehouse who don't meet that? Will they be able to win the SGA presidential election? Will they be able to be voted to the board, right? Will they be able to join the fraternity of their choice? Will they be able to be the top picks for whatever corporate jobs or whatever graduate programs or law school programs or medical school programs that they would like to participate? And when you look at the Morehouse man, that is all about proximity to whiteness in terms of what we put on our flyers, on our website, how we advertise what it means to be a Morehouse man. And because so much of what we do is funded and co-signed by institutions of influence. I'm trying to say this delicately because I don't know who's watching. By institutions of influence, we have to be mindful that whiteness is never about us advancing blackness or our black identity or liberation. So if what we're seeking is liberation, we're never going to achieve that by being closer to white.
So,
it's actually the opposite of what we'll achieve.
But that's interesting. So I'll kind of make this personal. So I'm a finance major. I want to go into corporate life. I guess you could say that's chasing whiteness in a way, because that is the majority of the environment. But you talk about we got to turn back to the black community. When turning back to the black community, I don't know if it'll get me to the places where I want to be. So how can you ask one to turn back to the black community?
How are you making your choice? What are your determining factors in terms of, so let's say that you get a job offer, right? One from Goldman and one from UNCF.
Okay.
They're offering similar amounts of money, similar benefits, but they're definitely two very different types of organizations. What decision do you make and why?
Based off of, let's say, my career goals, I love Mr. Alex Lomax, but I'm going to have to go to Goldman Sachs.
Why?
I think low picking the name is one, but second, it's proved to get people to places that I may want to be at.
Places like? Are we just trying to get you proximity to whiteness?
Making successful impact.
And so how are you defining success?
I mean, I guess it's a tailored to amount of dollars that you can make, but more importantly, the people that you can impact. And that's when it starts to get a little personal, but.
So you're going to impact people at Goldman that you wouldn't impact through UNCF, which literally funds Morehouse College.
No. I believe Goldman could put me in places and give me the skill set that I can go out and do my own thing that will result in helping the people in impact.
And you believe that just because you've done several internships there and you've seen what they've been able to teach you?
Prior experiences, other people's experiences. Nothing, I mean, maybe nothing in solitude.
And you don't know that UNCF can.
I do not know if UNC cannot do that.
But you would choose Goldman.
Based off of the information I have now, yes.
Right. And who's giving you this information?
Other peers at Morehouse.
Just peers at Morehouse? And where are they getting it from? Right. So think about all of these sort of sources of information. Right. So whether it's looking at the media, whether it's exploring what you're taught in class, whether it's looking at the images of success that we just see, right? On LinkedIn, your favorite, right? Those images never really demonstrate what we can pull from our community. So lately, I've been doing a lot with Brown versus Board. I don't know if you've seen the Belonging Beyond Brown documentary that the Morehouse Center for Excellence in Education has put together. But in this documentary, we talk about sort of Brown versus Board and what has happened. So I've been doing lots of listening to podcasts and just sort of refreshing on that because that's one of my areas. And the conversation that we inevitably have to have now that we're looking at 60 years, right, past Brown. Is that right? 70 years.
I was going to say it was 50s?
70 years, yeah. We still haven't achieved the success that we were hopeful to achieve as Black folks, right?
Okay.
Education is still not equal. Often our Black students are still marginalized in white spaces. We don't see, until it's time for gentrification, we don't see white folks coming into Black spaces. We just don't see the interaction that we'd hope for. However, when you look at the legislation for Brown v. Board, it indicates that Black schools were inferior and they were giving a gift to us by allowing us into white spaces, right? So on the one hand, you have Black families who are like, hey, we just want to have access to the resources, right? There's nothing wrong with the education that we're receiving. We just want real resources.
Yeah.
Then you have a Supreme Court who's saying, oh yeah, these Black kids have been so disenfranchised. We gotta let them come with us. That's the only thing that's right. So those two different perspectives collide. However, the court's decision is what shapes legislation. It's what shapes what is happening, who's making the decisions, how busing happens, how we had a program in DeKalb County called M2M, like, I don't know, magnet to magnet or something, right, where who gets put in what schools. That is very different from the marginalized communities' desires and expectations, right? And so we also see this in other capacities. But if we are in a position where Black success is never highlighted, unless it's, oh, look at how close they are to being white, look at how wealthy they are, look at all these things. If that's never highlighted, we're never going to aspire to that.
Okay, so if it's not something that's going to come from up top, what is the solution that we can have within our communities to, let's say, highlight Black success?
This is why I think in places like Morehouse and other Black institutions, like your fraternities, all the Black organizations that we do, they should be our think tanks. So we should be coming up, instead of figuring out ways to be the next biggest thing, right? The next best thing, because we're really good at that at Morehouse. We're really good at figuring out how to be great, right? Instead of just focusing on how to make ourselves great, we should be reaching out to the West End community and bringing those kids to campus, not just going to them, right? Because in effect, what we're teaching them is that, hey, we're good enough to come to you, but you're not necessarily good enough to come to us, right? Now, whether we say that or not, that's an unintended consequence, right? And so the fact that there are kids who live within 5 miles of this campus who cannot see themselves on this campus is our fault. And so what we need to do is to make sure that in these spaces where it's all us all the time, that we're thinking and building about how to be the best Black folks we can be. Now, of course, Blackness is not a monolith, right? So it's not going to be an easy sort of 1-2 punch. Yeah. But we can begin these conversations. Like, I really think Morehouse SGA, just put it out there, should do a lot more to engage what we're doing in our community, particularly given the gentrification of this area. We're so busy celebrating Starbucks is on the way and glad we got a Chick-fil-A that we're not thinking about the generations of Black families that are being displaced. Yeah. The generations that have supported us, that we have built our complete foundation on their backs, right? Right. So,
okay, so that's good. So I have a little pivot. I want to go kind of back toward the Black middle class. What are some misconceptions that people have with the Black middle class and tied to education?
So, number one is, I think that often, and again, this goes back to proximity to whiteness. I know that we're pivoting, but it's going to keep coming up. Okay. The Black middle class, again, once we gained access to live in white neighborhoods, to go to white schools, that matched our image of success. Yeah. And so what we did to our children was to put them in spaces that didn't verify or reify their entire identities, right? So perhaps it made their academic identity great. They were considered the exception or the token. But we have subjected generations of Black children into white spaces that aren't fulfilling them. Like in terms of racial socialization, I mean, they're pulling books and materials out of school now, right? Even in school. So for many Black middle class families, success was making it to the other side of the tracks. Yeah. But once you get there, what happens to you, to your personhood, to your humanity? Yeah.
Well, that's a great segment into something that we talk about a lot within finances with the racial wealth gap. Okay. And just how you sound like you might have something to say about it. So just how different it really is from class to class, as you allude to. If you want to just some of your thoughts on just the racial wealth gap.
Well, some of my favorite work is Oliver and Shapiro, Black Wealth, White Wealth, and then Shapiro's The Hidden Cost of Being African American. So when we look at the racial wealth gap, which generally is the average Black family has 10 times less the wealth of the average white family, right? On average, I think that's actually exacerbated some now in more recent data. But as we're thinking about this gap, wealth, I tell this to my sociologists all the time. They get nervous when I start saying numbers, right? So I give the compound interest formula, right? I'm like, I equals PERT. And they're like, oh, numbers. And I'm like, no, think through it, right? So when you're looking at an exponent of rate times time, we're never going to catch up. Yeah. So even in the conversation about reparations, which is something that we were promised, we're now 400 years in the hole with that. Yeah. We're never going to catch up. It's like a Monopoly board game. If when you start playing, I've already bought up Boardwalk and Park Place. Keep going, buy those utilities. That's great. Yeah. Interest-bearing accounts there. You know what I mean? So
the railroads.
That's the issue with the racial wealth gap. And we're not teaching finance in schools. Yeah. We teach the compound interest formula, but not how to make it work for you. Right? We don't. Now, of course, you all master that.
Not yet. Trying to help all of you all do that as well. Yeah, that's the whole point.
My oldest is he's sitting for the final exam of his CPA. He did finance at
awesome.
Howard. And so we talk a lot just about what big money looks like. Yeah. Right? And so in his employment at Deloitte, he manages some very significant clients. Yeah. And he doesn't tell me all the details, so I'm not outing him. He didn't tell me all the details, but I know it's big money.
Right.
And it's big money that we're unfamiliar with how to manage, which is why I love to talk about that broke 30 for 30. Like we were talking about basketball earlier, right? So when you look at these NFL players and these NBA players who make millions, they don't know what to do with it, right? But part of that is because when you grow up with means, you understand that at 2, you're not going to get the big Hummer toy SUV, right? You're going to get a CD. That's what your parents are buying you. You're going to get a trust, right? So that when you're 18 and ready to go out on your own, you've got a stockpile,
right?
Because that Hummer that your mama and daddy bought you when you were 2, that you weren't even playing by the time you were 2.5, has made no returns on that investment, right? So there's something to be said, not just about having the wealth, but knowing how to make wealth work for you.
Right, and I think that's so important. That's right up my alley.
Okay, so you like that.
Right, like, it's so fun because, like you said, it's what you grew up with is just what you know, and just having content and different podcasts and opportunities for people to just hear it, and if it's on them if they want to take the step forward or not, but you have to do your job in making the effort to reach out to them, and then hopefully that mindset will shift, hopefully eventually.
So when you get your big corporate job, who are you going to reach out to hopefully have that mindset shift?
I think it starts by coming back to Morehouse and doing things like this with students. Okay. I mean, we have people come back like this, but let's say if someone who graduated 2 years ago is, for example, to your son who is dealt with big accounts and dealt with people with large money, what are some of those traits that they see come back on and discuss like that?
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, it's not a paywall, but it's a skill wall behind those clients and everybody else.
Right, and a level of comfortability.
Correct. Right? And finding a way to assess that comfort, that's a challenge for most people. Yeah. So maybe having that conversation, I would believe is a great place to start that.
Well, I expect to see you in about 3 years.
I will hold you true to that. I love my school. So we want to start it, as we wrap up, I'm starting something new as of today. How we end podcasts. As of today, it's all about evolution. So as of today, it's called Rewrite Your Narrative. So my question to you, Dr. Welcher, is if your life were a book, what would you change about the last chapter, and what would you title the next one?
Ooh, that is good.
I'll give you some time to.
Yeah, so if my life were a book, I know what I would change about the last chapter. I would definitely do more research. So continue my work on the Black middle class, where families are deciding to live and go to work, and publish more of that. So that would be it. And the next chapter would probably be entitled, Where Do We Go From Here? And I say that because, to your earlier question, I think that in terms of my own sort of scholarship and anecdotes, I'm clear on where we are as Black middle class folks. And I fully own I am Black middle class. I'm all the things and I'm fine. Check all the boxes, yes, that's me. But there's an obligation and responsibility there, right? And if I'm aware of that, what is the burden on me to both prepare the next generation and ensure that my legacy lasts beyond my life? So where do we go from here?
That's good. Where do we go from here? We might have to get that book actually. Actually written. Shout out to the book. Shout out to Dr. Welcher's book. Well, with that being said, I really could sit and talk to Dr. Welcher all day. This is it's always so refreshing to learn so much from you. I will best believe I will be back. With that being said, behind cameras, I want to shout out Reed. I want to shout out Seth for making all of this possible. But with that being said, I hope you all enjoy the video. Make sure to like and subscribe and share this video with one person if they do not know the definition of the Black middle class. With that being said, we'll see you on the next one. Peace.